Hello and welcome. You are joining us for a new podcast series on the firm. This is a limited series between myself and the man, the myth, the legend that is David Ross. And this session is Mastering Client Advisory Services. In this podcast, we're going to break down how accountants and bookkeepers can elevate their advisory game without relying on the latest shiny tech. We actually want to break down the fundamentals of delivering advisory services, which is all about your client and helping your client achieve fundamental goals within their business, in their organizations. Today, we're joined by the incredible David Ross, a seasoned accountant and business coach who's helped countless firms redefine what it means to deliver impactful advisory services. In today's episode, we're asking the big question, is software holding your advisory services back? David's here to share hard-earned lessons from his journey, including insights from the super firm and why focusing on strategy and conversations, not tools, can completely transform how you approach advisory. So if you've ever asked yourself, but what will I say to clients, or felt overwhelmed by the idea of building your advisory services, then this series is for you. Because strap in, we've got at the moment 4 episodes planned, and we may do more. It depends on how much you like listening to us. And David's been very kind to share his advice and his time with us. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome David. David, how are you, mate? Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Trent, and it's good to hear that you've given me 4 episodes at least. It's you obviously know how much I can talk, so...
Dave, I'd love to just kick off. So a lot of people may not know who you are. We've been connected for a long time and maybe even shared a beer or two over the years. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and what you've been up to in your career as an accountant and coach to date.
Yeah, certainly. So once again, thanks, Trent, for having me on. Look, I started out in audit, as a lot of accountants do. I've been a CA for around about 26 years now. I've got the PIN to prove it. And what I did when I started my own firm was I just wanted to do advisory. And then I got on the road with picking up compliance because that's what would pay the bills. And this isn't anti-compliance. Compliance has, raised my kids, put them through school and uni. But I always wanted to do advisory. But the issue was, as I took on partners, as we grew the team, as we bought another practice, we just became so heavy in everything that was not advisory. And I got so far away from what I was doing. So I switched lanes a little bit and started up a business called Supercoach. And out of that came the concept that I work with other accountants, and that's Super Firm. And that's to help other accountants break this code of advisory and this barrier that's there. So along the way, I've done a lot of consulting with the accounting industry, but I wouldn't class myself as an accounting coach. I'm more interested in helping them get up and running with advisory. So we have a model where we'll go in and coach the clients. However, I find that a lot of accountants really need more of a guidance in terms of their strategy. And that's where we've been placed. Currently, I'm sitting in a condo in Manila in the Philippines. I'm at the moment getting up and running with our BPO offshoring company in the Philippines and getting that up and started. So that's keeping me busy as well. But let's get stuck into some of this advisory stuff because I think that's what is really the topic at hand.
Well, mate, you're a busy man. You're doing a lot, and I can imagine the weather would be scorching hot where you are, no doubt.
Yeah, a bit rainy, a bit cool, but very humid.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Well, look, I'm keen to dig in, and I've heard you present and talk about these things as well. Our first episode here, we're talking about the dependency that tech has brought in. And I think there's a big debate that I'm a marketer, right? So I take blame for some of these things too. Not all of them, but some of them. Marketing, making advisory sound like it's too easy. Hey, if you just click this button, you can deliver client advisory services. I'd love to unpack this with you. Do you have an opinion? Do you think it's the software companies we need to blame for this fallacy that we, when we talk about advisory and how easy it is as long as you've got the software to deliver it?
I wouldn't necessarily say the word blame, but I think it's got a part to play. It's the issue of that ease, and the best parallel I can use is the big blue accounting product. It's made accounting easy, and even before that, it was the purple accounting product when GST came in. I remember having clients say, "Oh, look, it's going to be easy now. The software does it all. I'm going to be my own accountant," and we know that never happened in the end. So with advisory, I think the software is great, and the software does make it easy. But there's a few steps that need to happen before that. So what ends up happening is that the accountant, we all love bright, shiny objects. You know this as a marketer. You tap into this. The bright,
100%.
shiny objects, we look at the software and we go, wow, this is just what I need. This is going to make my clients buy. This is a product that my clients will buy. That's the part that irks me. The software does a great job, but it kind of pitches it as a product that the client's going to buy. Now, the client then doesn't buy it, and we're left with shelfware that, we're paying a hell of a lot of money for, particularly the ones that tapped us in on buy up to 20 clients, costs you this much.
Yep.
Launch advisory with your clients, and you don't have 20 who are buying it, but you're paying a significant fee month after month after month. Then you lose interest, you get busy. All of a sudden, you're 12, 18 months down the track. And I say this from experience because I've done it. It's a significant investment in software and you've got nothing to show for it. What the accountant tends to do is the accountant tends to then go, oh, no, look, it didn't work. Advisory didn't work. I'm going to go back to what I know and what pays the bills. And that's fine, the compliance, but advisory then gets this stink about it because it didn't work. And that's a really sad thing. And the reason is because that front end, before you use the software, is not taken care of.
Yeah. Like a goal for this episode that people listening to this can walk away and go, hey, I've actually got a really good idea on where to start in terms of how do I deliver advisory services? What do those meetings look like with clients? What do my check-ins look like? There's a whole range of things. Where do we start and how do we approach this within the firm? So before we even get to the client, there must be a plan, right? You want to sharing some of the advice you give to firms at the start of trying to implement this client advisory service?
We run, with our super firm clients, we run a thing called Square One. And Square One starts at looking at the type of advisory that's going to suit the firm, because that will vary. I've run things at expos where we've put up a canvas, like a painting canvas, and had people, write on it what advisory means to them, because it's something that's always said to us. It's a different thing. And different practices focus on different areas. Increasingly now, you're seeing people who might have got out of tax altogether, but they're concentrating on valuation work, or they might just concentrate on CFO work, or whatever it may be. So the first thing we do is we actually look at the client base and we say, before you even go down this road of advisory, does your client base suit this type of work? You may want to do this work, but your current client base may be totally unsuitable for it. I've done work, to use an example, with a firm in a regional area in Australia. The database was filled with just their accounting software, really, filled with primary producers, self-managed super funds, deceased estates. You get the picture. So we're looking at a fairly unique client base to then want to offer a certain type of advisory services. So there was a mismatch. So what we needed to do was we needed to say, well, okay, look, the deceased estates, we'll offload those. Self-managed super funds, well, unless you've got a financial planning sort of arm and you're going to look at what you can do in advice that way, we really need to hive them off as well. What are we left with? All right, well, we're left with a smattering of sole traders bubbling around and primary producers. So when we're starting to look at the primary producers, we can't offer them the same advisory services as we would offer retail, or that we would be offering, NDIS companies or whatever it may be, different industries. So having a look at your client base is the first step, and working out, one, is there enough work in it to start with? And if there's not, then we have to then look at, well, okay, how are we going to build a market for these services once we put them in place? And then second, what are the services that you're going to offer? What type of advisory is it that you want to do, and what type of advisory does your current client base demand that you're going to offer? It's a big step that a lot of people just, again, buy the software and go, oh, well, we're going to have quarterly meetings.
Yeah, we're going to add
clients even want
$5,000 a month in revenue just by clicking a button. Is there any key questions you think accountants really should be asking themselves to determine? I've written down segmentation straight away. Who's the client and whether they're the right fit. I think that's really key. That's important. Who in the business should be doing this? Anyone in your team could be doing this. Anyone in your team can click a button, right? But I don't know. I'm in the belief that not every single person can deliver these types of advice and services. So how do you factor that in with a firm when you're trying to review the capability and the skill set of the organization?
I'm a big believer in somebody needs to know how to do the job first. We can't delegate to an accountant to do the work if we haven't walked in their shoes before. So the typical structure of an accounting practice will be a partner who's been at it for 10 or 15 years plus, and then brings in staff underneath and then starts to delegate to them and let them take on part of the client base and then do their thing as they learn and everybody rises up. Could you walk into advisory and all of a sudden put a staff member who's never done it before in charge? They have to be a certain type of person. But I think as a partner, you need to step in and look at what you're doing first, design the process, and then teach, train others, and then scale from there.
Got to get some wins on the board, right? Like my approach typically with some things is to find a client, a pilot of sorts, put a structure in place, do it myself, teach my team, and then try to scale that process out amongst that. And I think this would fit within that as well. I've heard the idea of white labeling advisory services. So let's just say I'm not a people person. I am, but let's say I wasn't. And I'm more introverted, but I run my firm, and I think a lot of accountants sit in this boat, right? They're an accountant that somehow started a firm, and now I'm a business owner as well. They don't feel super comfortable delivering these services. Have you heard of firms that would white label this? They bring in a strategic partner to deliver their advisory services.
That's exactly what Superfirm was originally designed to do.
Okay, it goes right.
So our tagline was, our coaches, your clients, advisory success. So there's difficulties with doing that. Accountants are very close to their clients and very cautious as to who they will open their clients up to. But the firms that get the concept can do quite well. And what that does is that frees them up to sit back from the process and manage it, scale it, but not necessarily get directly involved and bogged down in the process. I've seen firms try to do that internally, but it hasn't worked because the people that they've put in charge of it haven't had the runs on the board, albeit with other firms. If you're an accountant and you can poach somebody who's been doing good advisory at another firm, knows what they're doing, knows how to run it, fantastic. But they're unicorns. They're not going to be found. So the white labeling can work really, really well. But I've got some issues. Whether we'll cover them today or not, I don't know. But certainly there's some issues in and around the white labeling that's a frustration for the person doing the coaching work because the accountant kind of just goes, deal with it.
Yeah. And there's got to be good collaboration, right? If you're going to do that kind of service, there has to be good synergies and still a good feedback loop where it's like, hey, I'm the coach coming to this scenario. I need the financials. I need to let you know about the financials because it's going to impact some decisions we're trying to make around, I don't know, it could be acquisitions, could be hiring, could be a whole bunch of stuff, right?
One of the first things that we teach a firm is you've got to get all the team to understand what you're doing in advisory. And I've seen this many times where it's kind of like there's two divisions. It's a bit like the old tax and audit divisions on separate sides of the office. When it becomes time for advisory, the two or three people who are involved in doing it are over here plotting, taking over the world, but the rest of the staff are oblivious to what's happening. Now, you imagine if a client, back in the days when a client would walk into the office, client walks into the office reception and says, I'm here to inquire about this particular service. The receptionist just all of a sudden looks at them blankly and has no idea what they're talking about. As opposed to a client who walks in and says, I need to get my tax done. Receptionist all of a sudden goes into step 1, step 2, step 3. They know exactly the process. But for some reason, when we decide to do advisory, we keep it this little box over here that only the partner shall and the person responsible shall look after them and tell them. Why do we do that?
Well, it's a good question. My head just went as you were talking through the receptionist, and this role, sometimes corporate secretarial, it's answering phones, it's client queries and so forth. But you go to a gym and the person on the front desk is the salesperson. Like that person's trying to sign you up for the membership and knows all the admin and everything else. And I do wonder if there's actually a case here for the person you put on that front desk. But is there a case that this person could actually be your salesperson, right? They're the first person that's there. Why not?
It's a different process. Selling advisory is a completely different kettle of fish to accounting and tax compliance. It's always called a slow burn. The advisory is a slow burn. You've got to work the client through a process and a system of getting them to the point where you can get that big advisory job. Sometimes they just fall in your lap and they're fantastic. But very rarely you've got to work on a client to get them across the line because it's not something that they need by a deadline.
When I look at some of the other challenges in the industry, there's a few things around bookkeepers feeling like they're in an identity crisis. Advisory, I think, went through a similar piece where it's like, we don't want to call it advisory because it can mean so many things, and it sometimes has been tainted with a bit of a bad paintbrush in that sense.
Yep.
Do you have any tips on how firms can identify what makes the most sense for them with the types of advisory services they should be offering their clients?
I think it comes down to the size of the firm and the type of clients, primary production. Now, personally, I don't know one end of a cow to the other. If I was wanting to give advisory services to primary producers, I'd have to do a bit of learning, or I'd have to have somebody within my firm, which we used to have, who was the primary production guy. So you've really got to look at the style of the client, but you've then got to look at your skill set as well. So for me, I've got a bit of a marketing bent. I don't mind a chat. I've done training in personal coaching, executive coaching, so I know how to apply different frameworks to a conversation to bring people from a position of, being stuck where they're at through to being able to move forward. I've done a lot of change management work. So all of those skills fit more towards that consulting side, personal coaching side of things. I've got an art of making people cry in meetings, which my staff always found hysterical. But sometimes you've got to bring people to that point to get them to where they need to go. Now, other accountants might look at that and they might say, I don't want to do that type of work. And that's fine. So they need to decide if they want to do stuff that's in addition to, and again, I'm not compliance bashing here, or, if Paul Meisner ever watches this, he'd probably kick me in the rear end. But the issue is if you want to move out of tax and accounting services and into dealing with your clients on a range of other issues, you need to pick and choose. So advisory, it could be complex tax advisory. Something that's not bring your work in to get your 30 June accounts and tax done. It could be business valuation work. So there's a number of people in the market now who are saying, look, we're specialists in just doing business valuation and we do very little compliance now. That's just our niche. I'm very heavy on business planning. So that's my kind of jam, that angle. There are other people who love to go down the wealth creation side of things and then lead that into financial planning. So it's not financial planning stuff, but it's more looking at personal budgeting, looking at how they can structure their affairs, and then opening up the angles on asset protection and estate planning. They're angles that people can take for advisory. I don't want to touch estate planning. It's not my thing. So for me, for advisory, I get other people to come in and service my clients when we get to that part in their plan, my client's plan. You need estate planning. I know the guy. We're going to put you on to him.
So I guess
I project manage it.
Yeah, no, that's good. I love it. That's great. So I think just in true nature of we're breaking this down fundamentally. Where do you uncover these advisory opportunities? So we know that accountants, bookkeepers obviously meet with their clients regularly. It's not to say they can't be offering advisory services. You get accountants who typically meet with their clients annually, maybe quarterly, maybe monthly, but I think monthly you're probably maybe stepping more towards this type of service. How do we uncover these opportunities? Do you have any certain questions you're looking for? Is there numbers? Are you looking at a particular way to say, hey, this kind of looks wrong or right or whatever, but there's a conversation and now an upsell opportunity into strategic advice?
Yeah. Okay. Thing, you've got to talk to your clients. You mentioned monthly. Yeah, monthly's probably a bit too much. The client then starts to get overloaded with things, unless you're on a coaching plan, and that's the purpose. I meet with clients fortnightly. It's in some circumstances because they want it. They want that accountability and motivation. But you've got to talk to your clients. You're never going to pick up advisory or learn that your client needs things if you're not talking to them regularly. And unfortunately, the industry is so gassed and burnt out and busy, and we're trying to we're servicing too many clients, not enough. It probably didn't sound right, but we could be doing a lot more for a lot less clients and making the same amount of money. Yeah. So more touch points means more conversations. In our conversations, and this is where I come back to the tech. Okay. So if our conversations are just about presenting a report on the numbers, and I love numbers, it's a critical part. It's what sets us apart from business coaches, is knowing the numbers. But if all our meeting is about is presenting a report from a glossy piece of software and talking to that report and then packing up our briefcase and exiting stage left, we're not having the right conversation with the client. So they're having that conversation with somebody else, and that somebody else is either a mentor, a friend, a business coach. And then we sit back and we go, why are they using a business coach? Because the business coach asked the questions that we didn't ask. And the business coach listened and picked up on those things that they said, I can help you with that. Now, could we as accountants help with that? Damn right we could. But we don't give ourselves the opportunity, because all we're interested in is, the software provider told me if I provide this report, I can charge X amount a month. I'm going to charge X amount a month and meet with my client on a quarterly basis. Now, I'm generalizing here. Not every accountant who's presenting these reports and doing quarterly meetings is doing a bad job.
Absolutely.
Some of them are going great.
We're in a bit of an echo chamber, right? Like, some of this stuff is very generalized because we've seen, and look, I pay more attention to accounting software marketing than most people do, because I'm genuinely just critiquing all the time. Like, I would have said it differently, or I'm listening. I'm in those Facebook groups too. We're all talking about things that do work, don't work. And the whole reason we're having this conversation is to try to demystify this stuff and really, bring it back to grassroots, right? Like, that was my intention why we start the firm, right? I know all these conversations are happening. We want to help people move through that experience curve faster. And at the end of the day, we want them to help their clients in better ways. Like, we all want people to run fruitful, thriving businesses, and that's not always going to be the case for everyone. You can't convince everyone that, hey, they should take your advice. You've mentioned there a little bit about the, listening, right? And I guess, do we think accountants struggle with the art of listening when they're delivering their advisory services? Do you think that's a problem for accountants?
I think we want to solve the problem that pops up straight away. So something gets said and we immediately go into problem solve mode without letting it simmer, having a look at it and using those problems that come out as each one's like a selling piece. And that may come across as unethical, but at the end of the day, the client, we need to look at problems. We need to look at solutions. Every solution is a product that we can sell to our client, and that the client is willing to buy if they've got a burning desire to get that problem solved. But what we do is we typically hear something, we go straight into problem solve mode, and then a half an hour has disappeared. So I use a scorecard with a lot of prospects, particularly, but also with clients. So if somebody pops their head up around a coaching topic, and I think, there's an opportunity here to have a deeper conversation. First thing they get is a scorecard. And this is something we'll talk about in a future session, about building what they call an ascending transaction model. Yeah, you'd be familiar. Yeah. So we've got to have steps in the process that aren't a commitment from the client, but they're getting something of value, and then they're going to continue the conversation until we get to a higher point. So the scorecard asks really, really simple stuff. It's, do you have a business plan? A yes or no question. If you have a business plan, do you review it regularly with a mentor or a coach? How often do you review your financials? All of these style of questions are just getting into, do you procrastinate?
Absolutely. And what's the point of having the scorecard? I mean, I understand the idea of a scorecard being it's a tally of numbers, and I assume the higher the number, the more likely you're a good fit for me. You're almost qualifying, qualifying the customer, right? Like, that's your whole goal with the scorecard?
Yeah. So I use it, one, for qualification, but two, to sometimes just flesh out a concept. So a client might call me and say, look, we've got a few things happening next year. I think we need to, do some planning for next year. And I'll say, well, okay, look, I'm going to shoot you over my scorecard, take you 5 to 10 minutes to complete it. It'll just give me a really good idea of where you're at. Then the next step is critical. You ask what the scorecard's for. So the scorecard will give them a number. Big deal. It's not the number that I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is the ability to then set a meeting and have a conversation. So we go through their answers. Now, the thing I learned many years ago is sometimes people will answer something yes when the answer is actually no. So we've got to have a conversation around what they actually mean. And they go, oh, yeah, no, I probably got that one wrong. I probably meant this. Okay. And then we can unpack every little thing. So this allows you to have the conversation. It leads the conversation. And then all you've got to do is open these things up. And
pointing to your ears right now.
Yeah, these
things, yeah.
I'm not Prince Charles.
Just for those that are listening,
sorry,
that can't
King
see
Charles.
David. Yeah.
Showing my age. The issue around the listening is each of those questions is designed to fit in that scorecard is designed to fit into a product.
Yep.
Do you have a business plan? Yes or no? Do you review your business plan regularly? So the first question is, do you have a business plan? If no, there's a product. Do you review it regularly? Not really. It's in the bottom drawer because I had to produce it for the bank. Okay. Quarterly meetings too. And there's a reason for us to have the quarterly meeting. We're not just fronting up and saying, we bought this new bit of software. Please let us have a quarterly meeting with you to run the numbers. It's not really that flashy to a client. Client doesn't see the need for it. So what they do is they see the need if all of a sudden the scorecard uncovers that they really don't have any plan. They're wandering around aimlessly. They're completely overwhelmed. They need to look at how they can, stop working 60, 70 hours and actually get some control of their life and control of their finances. Now we're starting to hit some nerves with the clients in terms of things. Now we can go into coaching mode or advisory mode.
So scorecards are a really good tool. I like the scorecard because as we said, it's qualifying. It's also helping people identify an advisory product. And you obviously have to create and determine internally what those products are. But that does become a nice scalable thing, at least that people should be able to talk about. Delivering it, maybe something else, I guess. So if the scorecard's a really good framework to help people qualify the client to be ready for advisory, help them understand the product that they should be buying, is there any other sort of, in my notes here, I talked about the idea of a simple conversation structure, right? So if there's a good set of, and maybe the scorecard is that, but do you have a set of key questions that and you've just said you had in the scorecard, but outside of the scorecard, is there other key questions or other frameworks that you recommend, tools that you recommend people are using? Not tools as in software tools, but like, again, the scorecard doesn't have to be software. It's just a set of questions you're asking, but it's helping you identify something.
Yeah, certainly. The main other framework that I use is a more of a personal coaching framework. So I lean on, because I've been through the scorecard a million times, and I've also got a published book that goes through a lot of this process, is a lot of it's committed to memory. So it's just become muscle memory now to go through that. So I like the idea of a structure, and the structure doesn't need to be War and Peace. It just needs to be simple. But the other one that I use is a personal coaching framework, and it's rooted in the NLP or neuro-linguistic programming, Tony Robbins type stuff, right? And it just starts with a really simple question. What is it that you're wanting to achieve?
Yeah. I mean,
that is it. And then just leave silence like we just did.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, is he asking me the question? Because I can go there. We can do a live session right now.
Yeah. And I thought it was fantastic. I've got it floating around somewhere, but it's just every time I think of talking too much in a client meeting, I think of that, because sometimes we just got to leave some space for the client to actually speak and let us know. So when you just say to a client, Trent, what is it that you're trying to achieve with this? Ends up a conversation, and you tell me, oh, well, look, I'm wanting to go into this. And then I might then come back to you and I might say, okay, so have you actually sat down and actually put a proper plan together? Oh, look, I've got a lot of this stuff in my head, and I've been working with a friend who's kind of helped me out. He's been in the industry before. I say, yeah, okay, all right. Well, often I find that if we actually facilitate the plan, it's good having a fresh set of eyes, someone who's not close to you, somebody who's kind of worked with a number of different industries to help just flesh out your ideas and get some of these things down on paper, because the biggest thing of a plan is your action. How are you going time-wise? Are you managing to get it all get all of this together, or are you stretched from one end to the other? So you're asking a time question. Now, these are things that are totally unrelated to the numbers. And this is kind of my space. But as I said, other people, there might be different advisory. It could be tax advisory. So it's a different set of questions. Somewhere you've got to open up for the client to talk. You've got to let them spill the beans, and then you pick up on the snippets and then keep the conversation moving. It's an art form.
Yeah. You've mentioned a little bit about advisory being as a slow burn compared to the compliance work. And I think I think when I hear you say that, you're talking about the fact that this just isn't something that turns on like a light switch. There has to be intent and intentional planning, identifying the right clients. There's a whole piece here on having CRMs and using CRMs to keep track of our clients, because I know a lot of firms don't even go to that extent with this stuff. Nominating someone in the business to be responsible. Not too different to when we adopt software. We want champions to do certain things. And in this case, there has to be a champion. And this, I'm summarizing, obviously. And this is me then going, well, we need to get some quick wins on the board. So I'm going to be the person that delivers and drives this first. We're going to get wins on the board. And the win has to be the client succeeding and loving it, and us having a product that works, right? Because there's no point in trying to say, hey, we're going to do this for everyone. We sell it to everyone. Some of them buy it, and then we haven't worked out the kinks of what does and doesn't, when we haven't figured out how to help our clients unlock that success. That's my interpretation of you saying advisor is a slow burn. Is there anything else that you would add to that? Have I got that completely wrong when you think
No, that's on the money. And probably the only thing to add is you need to have assets in and around it. And by assets, I mean you need to have content, you need to have things. And I mentioned the ascending model. So you need to have bits of content all along the way to drive a person from point A to point B. It's a planned process. And it works. But what happens is we go, hey, want to buy advisory? No. Hey, want to buy advisory? No. And then we give up because we don't have that planned process. Whereas it's much easier. Hey, want to buy a tax return? Oh, yeah, it's tax time. I'll come in and get one.
With what you just said, because if anyone sends me an email saying, do you want to buy advisory services, which they wouldn't say that, although I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I'm being facetious.
But I wouldn't be surprised if I did get an email that said that.
Yeah, they'll be there somewhere.
But the one thing you did say that I really liked was identifying what those products were. They're, e.g., business planning and helping to write a business plan. That's a really functional, practical version of an advisory service, right? Like I think, whether it's estate planning, whether it's even this mergers and acquisitions piece, is, the M&A element of is also a form of doing due diligence. Do you think that forms part of it as well?
Yeah, for sure.
I'd almost love to get a good list of, because when we say like, what does advisory actually mean? I'd love to say, actually, it's the next layer down are these 20 things. Here's the 20 different ways you can offer advisory to your clients. I think that actually be really helpful.
I'll give you some examples from a real life coaching meeting that I've had over the last 2 fortnights with one of my good coaching clients. These are the things that we talk about in our coaching meeting. So he was approached by an overseas company to manufacture their product. So we simply brainstormed for 15, 20 minutes in and around what he was going to do with this inquiry, how he was going to handle it. He's never dealt with an overseas company wanting to basically license him to manufacture their product. In the end, it turns out that his product, he makes a lot of the products that they make, and it just became a little bit too muddy. He would have spent a hell of a lot of time working on this particular thing and neglected other parts of his business, which are going gangbusters. So in 15, 20 minutes, he's got more value from me in that time than he would typically get from just a conversation in and around the numbers. To me, that's the type of advisory that I do. I'm just there to listen to what's happening. And that all came out of the question, out of our coaching meetings, what challenges have you had this month? Oh, well, look, I'm working on this inquiry that I've got through from here. This guy's in a business that's grown significantly from when he bought it, and we helped him negotiate that by the due diligence and whatnot beforehand. So again, that was a chargeable advisory service. We've now been working for him. This is our 3rd year working with him on coaching. And the things that we're talking about now are totally different from the things we were talking about initially. He's grown with our coaching to more complex issues. Now he's on top of the numbers. He's telling me the numbers before I'm telling him. He monitors everything. But now he's got expanding issues in and around his accounts receivable. because he's doing bigger contracts, bigger jobs, and bigger companies trying to screw the smaller guy. And now we've got to help him navigate a different level of business, because previously he could be this little small business growing. Now he's playing with the big boys. He's got to get professional. He's got to have certain things in place, and his documentation's got to go off the chart. So all of that is advisory stuff, but it's all packaged under our annual coaching package that we do for him. It's part of accountability and number monitoring once a month.
Love it. That's awesome. That's a great story. I'm trying to think through, like, we're coming probably towards the end of this session today. We've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about a lot of things at a grassroots level. We've kind of established where the marketing of the software companies has driven a particular narrative and helped put a lot of maybe distrust in the word advisory as well, because we've said, well, it's as easy as clicking a few buttons. As I said, I take some ownership, but not all the ownership. There's other people out there that write this stuff, and I've never worked for an advisory company. So we can talk more about this another day. I'd love to just get maybe the two. So of all the things we've spoken about today, 3 key tips. There's 3 key things you want someone to take away and start doing right now after listening to us today. What are those 3 things in relation to getting an advisory service into, say, my accounting firm? 3 top tips.
Okay. First, I think would be get a CRM.
And do you recommend one?
Currently, I'm using High Level. It's got so much to it, though. The biggest tip with CRM that I've got from a non-software person is work out what it is that you want that product to do and make sure that product will do it. Because quite often you get into a CRM product and you find that it just won't do what you do, so then you have to switch. I've probably used about 5 in my time, from ACT through to now being on High Level. But it's a CRM, not your accounting software. Unless the accounting software all of a sudden rises up out of the ground and gives you something that's going to be robust, from being able to, lead scoring, being able to communicate with your leads direct from software, or even recording conversations and whatnot within your CRM, so as you can go back and do the sales process. Because even though accountants may have now got to the stage where they can actually communicate and sell, it's the follow-up and the consistency of the sales process that lacks if you don't have a CRM. So getting a CRM in place is critical. I've worked with firms through Superfirm who haven't had a CRM, and when we've gone in there, we've said, okay, let's analyze your client database. That's been a nightmare with their software. Then it's, okay, well, where do you typically get all of your business from? What's your marketing strategy? Oh, we get it from referrals. Okay, who are your top referral sources? There's Mick down at the insurance company, and it just becomes so vague, and it's so hard to get up and running with this is the white labeled stuff. So that's the first tip that I would say. The second is look at your current client base in line with what it is that you see advisory as, trying to get a match. Because if there's a mismatch, then you need to then determine, well, okay, how am I going to get the type of clients who are going to want to buy what I want to sell? So a good example would be valuation work. Is there enough within your current client base to really get some stuff out of that? And valuation work's great for advisory because you can do value gap stuff. What is it that you think your business is worth? What is your business worth? Okay, let us take you from here to there, or get you closer. So yeah, understanding what's there, and if it's not there, how you're going to go and get it. Then you can determine whether advisory is worth it or not. If advisory is not worth it, forget it and just stick to what you do and make good money out of what you do. Stop wasting your time trying to achieve advisory if it's never going to happen for you. And the third will go into a future session, I think, and it's having a model. You've got to have I don't like calling it a sales model, but it is. It's
I would say framework, actually.
Yeah, you've got to have a way of taking a client from here to there. Getting something on one page is important. Having that ascending model, having the content that's attached to it, so as you can get the right touch points when you're looking at trying to attract advisory leads and then nurture those leads through to actually buying from you. So they're probably the top 3 things. And the top tech, even though we're saying ditch the tech, the top tech I think is CRM. We all go and buy the tech to produce the numbers, but we forget about where we're going to get the clients from. So I'd be getting a CRM before I got anything else.
Yeah, CRM is good one, tough one. I've heard of GHL or Go High Level before. We're a HubSpot implementation partner. We do a lot of HubSpots, and they do a free version of, which is probably could be mostly okay. The free version of it does get expensive when you start spending money on
Building
it. So
it.
just be mindful if you do look at HubSpot. The free version's good until it's not. Pipedrive might be the other one that's not too bad, that was all about pipeline management, and I think super important for sales processes and frameworks is having the pipeline. And then there's a whole bunch more I could list off as well. But yeah, HubSpot and Pipedrive would be my, outside of a Google Sheet or a Trello board or something like that.
Just getting
But I
started.
think the database, as you said, is the key part, and recording those conversations.
Yep.
To understand those things are happening, which is why I do like HubSpot for that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, Dave. This has been great. We've gone through a whole bunch in this session. We've tried to talk through why we need to ditch the tech in terms of mastering our client advisory services. And I think it's breaking the tech dependency. That's the key thing we've really tried to outline. We covered off whether advisory was right for you as the listener. Is this the thing that you should be doing and looking at? We talked about segmenting the client base within there. We talked about some of your key lessons, and you had some really good stories, which I loved. The art of listening and the power of conversations. I think, you talk through scorecard, simple question framework, and trying to help unlock people that then push them into certain products. There is a whole piece here on how do we scale this without advisory, and I think we're going to cover that in another session.
For sure.
And the last and kind of big thing here is that it is a slow burn, because there's so much setup and intentional planning that has to happen to make sure this is the right fit. We have the right resources. We have the right client base that can benefit from these services. Mate, that's been a good first session. How are you feeling on the end of our first episode?
Good. Told you I could talk.
You did. You nailed it. I think that's the whole name of the game. So if you're sitting here, you enjoyed this session, good news. We've got David coming back for at least 4 more episodes. We're episode 2. We're going to be talking about how to build advisory from the ground up. So start small, scale big. How do we do that and make sure we're driving real value? We're going to then talk about mastering the client conversation in episode 3. So from meetings to meetings, structuring advisory sessions that work for you and for them. And then number 4, how do we scale advisory with global support? So if this is something we wanted to do using your offshore teams and leveraging other capacities to make these things happen, Dave's going to break that all down for us on mastering client advisory services. David, thank you so much. How should people get in touch with you if they want to learn more and engage, or just ask questions about things they've heard today?
Yeah, look, probably the easiest is connect on LinkedIn if they're on LinkedIn, or probably email as the next. It can come through to my EA, and she makes sure that I see it. So if it goes into other socials, it sometimes tends to get in the mix and spin round. So email is david@direction.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, David. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, listeners, for joining in. This has been another episode of The Firm. If you want to learn out more, you can go to thefirm.media. We have peer-to-peer content. This is accountants helping accountants on all the things that help you move through your experience curve faster. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to hearing and seeing you on another episode very, very soon. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Trent.